That feels
He was
good.
testing the volume.
Hey y'all, welcome to our first ever live recording of Drawing South. I'm here with my pal, Donna Woodley. Donna, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I was telling the audience, you've been on the podcast a bunch, but this is the first time we had to dress up for it.
Right.
And then, you know, you and I always talk about, like, what do we want to talk about? And then we kind of just get to talking.
Yes.
How's your semester going?
It's going well.
Yeah.
It was interesting start, but going well.
Are you interested in talking about what was interesting about it, or are you like, that's not my business?
You know, well, I'll just say, the kids get younger and younger
Yeah.
each semester.
Right.
And so it's a little more of I mean, I've never taught high school, but I would imagine that that high school teaching maybe innate way or of nurturing comes into play for college, where when we were in school, we didn't necessarily receive that as much.
I always say I wish I got the dental pay for the dentist work of pulling teeth that I do as a teacher.
Yeah.
Like, that would be nice to actually make that kind of money
It
for
really would.
the amount of teeth pulling that you often do.
Yeah.
It pays off though, right? Like in your head, like by the end of the semester, like you're like, oh man, I really love these students. Do you have that often where you're like a
right
rough
now.
start gets to where you're like, oh man, I'm so glad we got over that hump?
I'm there right now.
Yeah.
I tell my I tell any of the students, like in any of the classes, I should say, particularly my drawing class, it's difficult to get a 100 in the class because I know that the student can always go further. But if the drawing if the drawing makes me want to curse, then that's up in the 100 territory.
Like when you see the drawing, you're like, damn, that's good.
Yeah,
that
like,
kind of thing.
or
Not
I want to like in the way of like how choir members do in church. If somebody's like singing their face off, then you want to take your shoe off and throw it.
Okay.
If the drawing makes me want to take my shoe off and throw it, then that's 100 territory.
That's fun. Can you talk, like, what other things, like growing up in the South, what other fun stuff like that? Like, my friend Johnny taught me this thing in Florida. We were talking about eating something, and he's like, oh, you can put your foot in that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what other, like, that, when you say, like, you want to throw, I love that as a college professor at TSU, you're talking to students about, like, hey, the grading scale is 90 to 100 is an A, or if I feel like throwing my shoe at your drawing, that's also a 100.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of want you to codify that and put it on your syllabus.
I really
like, if your
do.
teacher curses because your drawing's so good, it's also an 100. Other than that, just go ahead and take your 92 because that's what you got.
That's what you got. Yeah, and it's not even based on. I would say it's not even based on ability, or because some students come into the class and they haven't drawn by observation, and then some have.
Right.
And so like this semester I have one student in particular who has done that. So he's grasping a hold to the concepts, but he still has improvement things that if he does it, it makes me, I'm like, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
And then there are students who, if I'm, let's say figure drawing, for example, instead of drawing an oval, they might draw a circle. But when they get to that oval and drawing, you know, and following the directions or the skull, and it's like what I asked them to do, it's the same feeling. I just reach for that shoe, you know, metaphorically speaking.
I think this is a good time to kind of talk about something, because I think, you know, there's several teachers in the audience, and you know, this particular episode, this is a collaboration with Educators Cooperative. So Amy, who's the executive director, who's a friend of mine, who's a great teacher, she's here, and I'd asked her about if she wanted to say it. She's like, you're good at saying it. Go ahead and say the thing. But Educators Cooperative, so thinking about like that idea of teaching, that like breaking it down, that, you know, some people listening who aren't teachers, right? Maybe they fell asleep in that 30 seconds. I bet every teacher in the room was like getting a little closer, like, how did you get them to move from that subtle like circle to the oval part?
Okay.
You know, but anyway, so Edco, we're really excited about this collaboration. You've been on our Culture Corner calls for Educators Cooperative, and, you know, connecting teachers to your practice. And so we really appreciate what Edco does.
Absolutely.
And they connect teachers across grade levels, across sectors, and across disciplines, right? So there's 234 educators in Nashville across public, private, and charter schools that are now part of Educators Cooperative.
That's awesome.
It's really cool. And
Yeah,
you've
that
like
is.
resourced them
Yeah.
through you collaborating with being on our Culture Corner call.
Right.
But I think this might help me around on Spotify. This isn't officially a commercial, so I'm just casually talking about how awesome EDCO is, and I can
love
still
it.
say that, but when you're talking about that kind of nuts and bolts of teachers, it's like what we do. I'm a member of Educators Cooperative. It's what we do. We sit around like this at schools and talk about this stuff.
Yes.
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 When you and I talked about doing this, you're like, let me do something first. Let me make sure. And you were meaning I want to be somewhere in my practice that I feel excited about talking about. And of course, I said to you, no, you don't have to do that.
Right.
Let's sit down and talk.
That actually was a relief.
Where does that come from for you of feeling? Is it because we are in a city, right? Teresa's here, like the fellow artist. Is it because we know we're around other artists who are making so much work that you felt like there needed I'm curious where that kind of puritanical I need to have done something to be worthy of sitting on this podcast and chatting, even though it's just me and we've done it before. I'm curious because when you said it, I was like, ooh, I want to put a little flag on that to be I want to go back from Donna, do you like me not feel worthy of the world if you're not doing?
That is a great question. I have been going through, I've told, I don't think I told you, but I told another person, another one of our colleagues, I was like, I feel a little lost. It's not that I'm short of ideas, but I've been feeling short of time, and then also short of energy in some instances. And so it's just been not a whole lot of making going on, and then when you have 52 jobs to make things, band together, then that plays into it too. But yes, to answer your question, there's a little bit of pressure there when you've, and I know we know that life has its ebbs and flows, so it goes up and down, and doesn't have to be tragedy down here, but it could be a little lull down there or whatever. But so yeah, there's a little pressure there to do things and to make.
When you say there's a lull in making, is that just in relationship to your highest point of making, or is there truly a stop? Are you still making sketchbooks? It's just
I'm
compared
still,
to your this is Donna, in fifth gear, efficiently cruising, I'm going and I'm hitting all the stuff, and I'm taking this commission, but I'm also doing my other work.
Right. So it's been a hard time balancing the commissions and then the ideas. So the commissions and then my stuff. So so yes, to when I was well, I haven't really made anything or whatever. And then there's also I've been having to remind myself of what I tell other people, comparison is the thief of joy.
Right.
Never compare. Your path is your path. And this morning I was in the shower. I sing in the shower sometimes, and and there's a song, "What God has for me is for me."
You're not
and
interested in singing a little bit of it right now?
Oh, I mean, it's
you don't have to.
No, that's cool. I just get shy when I say it's what God has for me, it is for me. What God has for me, it is for me. I know without a doubt, I'm nervous, that He will bring me out. What God has for me, it is for me. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what I got. You are my friend to get me to sing on the camera. Appreciate you, Jess.
So, I was gonna that helps me in this other way. So I've never talked to someone about you where we haven't kind of like that person and I, if we both know you, where we talk about how you're just the nicest person ever. Mm-hmm. And then the question was like, do you extend that towards yourself?
Ooh,
right? And so like, I hope singing in the shower, like that beautiful song, I bet it feels great. It sounds great with the reverb of it coming back.
It did sound a little better this morning.
Is that your version of like, I don't want to say self-care, but is that your compassion for yourself? Is like, I want to sing this song to me, like, or is it? That's good. Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
It
like,
does.
I see you with students, but I also see you with the community that we live in inside of like, right? And all of us feel that about you. Like you care for all of us in the way of like, there's always a smile. There's always like, I had some stuff I was going through last school year, right? Like there were some things I was really stressed, and I said, hey, I don't mean to dump on you. And you're like, no, come on, tell me what's going on, right? And then, so that just, that kindness that you kind of have, I guess, what are ways in which that's extending yourself to you? Because I, by the way, I'm super guilty of not being kind to myself.
We're in the same boat. I've had to work on that, but what you're asking me overall, and it's hard to not be the way, it's just a part of me. Like I care about other people more so than I care about myself, but I still care about myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I know if I can help somebody or do something where I can get it done faster, even though I have this over here to do, I'll say, okay, I enjoy helping people.
Sure.
That's the bottom line.
That came from growing up with your family. You think that's just coming from you, or was that like more caught than taught? Like you grew up in a family where that was just an expectation?
Yeah, that's just how
we help each other. We help each other out. So you just kind of arrived in that spot.
Yeah.
So teaching for you, kind of a natural fit in relation to
unbeknownst
to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because I was doing accounting at first, but I knew I wasn't happy. But I didn't know I would be a teacher until after I came back for art to TSU.
You were like, I know the story. Like people have heard it before, but like I think it's important to like. It is one of my favorite stories. Like you were practicing as an accountant. Like you were working, had a job. Like that was your career.
Yeah, I was.
And then went back to school to be an artist.
Yeah, and I had finally found a job that I really enjoyed in accounting. I was an internal auditor. And what that is for a title insurance company. So when you do real estate closings, a part of the package is to get title insurance, land title, like land title insurance or land insurance. And so the attorneys and the closing offices are issuing these titles from the company that I worked for. And so with that, they're responsible. Like the attorneys they have control of the money, but the title insurance company that I worked for were on the hook if something came awry with the money. And so I would go around to all of the agents, as they call them, meaning all of the title insurance customers, and do like this audit program to make sure that they weren't stealing any money, or just to make sure they were running everything in the way that was appropriate, that they were supposed to be doing. And so I got laid off in 2009. I started there in 2003, and then I worked. I was like, oh my gosh, finally I found a job that I really enjoyed. And I had a company car, a gas card, I could travel. It was a lot of fun. And so my friends, we would like do things, and sometimes I would travel more than I would actually be in the offices to do the work.
Sure.
And then I get back to Nashville and I'll be like, where we going today? What are we doing? And so they would tease me and say, you like Tommy, you don't have a Tommy on Martin. You don't have no job. You ain't got no damn job. And so we would just laugh about it. But I really enjoyed that job. And then the 2008, the real estate market crashed, just the economy in general. And then 2009, I got laid off. But as soon as that, pretty close to when that happened, I was like, okay, let's switch gears and let's do art.
Had you been kind of like in your head going like, man, I love this job, but I should be painting? or did it?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And so like when that happened, yeah, Hamilton Glass from up in Richmond had a similar. He was working as an architect because that's what he was told to do, right? Like this is a job. This is the only thing you can be creative in, right? Like you can be creative, but you're gonna have to have money.
You gotta have money.
So here's the closest creative thing you can do is you can be an architect, right? And so, but then when he got laid off, it like made this opportunity where he kind of just had to figure out. Now he's like famous mural painter, right? And you know, and so that's an interesting thing. So that happens, and then you start doing that. I want to switch. So, what was the first thing you came to TSU, and is that when you started making work there?
Yes.
So that's where you went back to school.
Yeah, when I went back to school, I was just going through the program, and I finished in 2 years because I had already had the accounting degree.
Gotcha.
And so, just learning about paint. I was really interested in painting right off the bat, and I had Sam Dunson for a professor, and I didn't have Mike McBride for a painting professor, but I think I remember having him for art appreciation. But way back when I was in school for accounting, I had taken Michael McBride for ceramics.
Oh, wow.
And that's what made me even think to go back.
Gotcha.
I just walked in the school. I said, let me go up here and just see.
Just took an elective.
Yeah. And well, yeah, I took it as an elective. But years later, before I came back, I walked into school because I was going to see about talking to somebody. And I ran into Michael McBride. And I didn't think he remembered me. And he was like, I remember you. You were in my ceramics class. And I was like, how do you remember? Okay.
Yeah.
And so it just seemed like it was all supposed to happen.
He does seem to have a catalogic memory for students that come through that department at TSU. And he's been there a bunch of years.
Yeah.
What's it like now? Is it hard for you are you able to kind of process in your head that you're Sam Dunson's peer?
That was an adjustment. Because even now when I joke with him.
Do you call him Sam or do you still say Professor Dunson?
I finally have called him Sam. But when I am joking around, I'll be like, Mr. Dunson, you know. So and then he'll just start laughing. But he had to tell me, along with Michael McBride, they had to tell me, you can call me Michael, you can call me Sam. And I was like, okay, that might take a minute. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's just. Well, and I was an adult in school anyway. You know what I mean? I was an adult when I went back. So
yeah, but not only are they, it's not just that they were your professors. Mm-hmm. That's a part.
Right.
But also like they're standing one in the TSU community, right? And what that means. So just above TSU, inside the department, just Tennessee State University, like the larger, because they've taught so many students who are now back in. Who took them for art appreciation classes, or you know, so in the larger community, but also just both of their standing as artists in our Nashville and then regional and then national community. Yeah, like that part must be really weird for you when they like. There's just that expectation now that you would consider yourself their peer.
That
because it's not just you going like, oh, it's my peer who's my former professor.
Right.
It's Sam Dunson who's. You know, doing a mural in California this year that will be part of a legacy piece of his that we'll all look back on and people will write papers about and all those different things. And that he had his show at Julia Martin that I still can't quite process how good it was.
Oh my gosh. It was amazing.
It was so good. And that you'll be following his Instagram feed and then Bisa Butler's just like, good work, Sam. And you're like,
wait a minute.
Are you friends with Bisa
Bisa
Butler?
Like, yeah.
And so that part, you know, what has been the funnest part about that for you of like going like, oh, like, is there a part where you've acknowledged to yourself, like, I kind of made this, like I did this thing, like I lost a job that I loved and had to figure this thing out. And I'm teaching at TSU. Like I'm like, this is like if I would have told you in 2009, hey, you not only do you need to switch careers, but I want you to like be a professor at TSU. That would have been overwhelming. Yeah, for sure. You would have been like, I need to get a job first, right? Or I need to get this other degree.
And I'm a structured person.
Has it?
So I'm like,
has that been a real hard part? It's like kind of coming back around, like or not coming back around, but have you let that kind of wash over you? How overwhelming it is that you're there doing that thing?
Yes.
Or is it just the day-to-day kind of gets to you?
It's like I say, well, I wore this for a reason. I don't know if it's backwards on camera, but I'm thankful.
It's not.
You know, first of all.
I got official.
Okay.
Joey gave us the official.
Thank you.
It's fine.
Thank you, Joey.
Thankful forwards.
Yes. And so, but a quick story about Sam, to your point of his accolades, and also Mike, but with Sam, I believe, I can't remember whether I had to be still in school, and at the time I banked with a particular bank, and so I don't know if I need to say who, but you know.
Maybe there'll be a sponsor.
Yeah, so it was Wells Fargo. Bring the sponsorship on. And so I just happened to be on the website one day, and I see a work of art that's just kind of panning through, like, you know, on their main page. And I looked at it and I was like, that's Mr. Dunson's work.
Oh, wow.
Like when you the wellsfargo.com, that's what popped up.
Right,
and
on their national website,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. And so
it wasn't the Nashville location.
No, it was just the whole wellsfargo.com. And so the next day I said, Mr. Dunson, are you is your artwork on Wells Fargo's website? And he started, you know how he is. Mm-hmm. He just started smiling. He was like, yeah, it is, you know. And I was like, do you know? Huh? Right. That was a big deal. Right. And so, for like, he's just as humble, you know.
I get pretty excited when I see someone else's work I know in someone's house.
Yeah. I
can't wait to call them and be like, hey, I was at so-and-so's house and I saw your artwork.
Yeah.
But to see it on just like a national brand, like that
was crazy.
It's kind of overwhelming.
And then he'll be like in the Smithsonian somewhere, and you won't, and you might happen upon it, like you said, you see it somewhere, like in somebody's house, but it's just a cool thing to your point as far as peer, like for him to ask me a question, like at this point in this point in my career with teaching and being an artist, and I'm like, you asking me? And so we'll just start laughing about it. I was like, hey, I appreciate you wanting to even pick my brain for anything, right. You know? So right. Yeah. And it's a little bit different with Mike McBride in that he is more, you know, he's a mentor, he's a natural teacher. Yeah. So he's guided me like in ways that have like really, really been uplifting and pushed me further in my art journey, in my education journey.
Michael McBride, there's a Tennessee Arts Academy is this great organization here in Nashville that it's been at Belmont. I think it's moving to MTSU, but they do these great teacher workshop, and it's a week long. You've done it, right? Like you've been part of that faculty.
Yes.
And I've always been like, man, that would be a checkbox in my career to like teach at Tennessee Arts Academy for the week. I did a couple little pop-ins. You know, they do those little 45-minute sessions, and I know Libby Lynch. I'm starting to get to know her pretty well. Yeah. And so I was like, it was cool that I got to do that thing. Even just the 45-minute. But there's a week-long faculty experience where they pay you, and they pay you really well, and you're there, and you get to work with and I get a call at the end of the semester last year. It's like, hey, is this Mike Mitchell? And I go, yeah. And they go, hey, this is Frank with Tennessee Arts Academy. Michael McBride said you're our guy. I didn't have to apply for anything. I didn't have to like fill out. I mean, I had to do it after the fact. Like once I said yes, and I said, I am. He said, are you our guy? And I was like, I am. What do you need me to do?
Yes.
And I went to him and I was like, hey man, like, like, thank you. Like, why did you do that? And he's like, oh man, I watch you around here. He's like, you're doing great. He's like, they need you. So I called him and told him, hey, I got somebody for you.
Oh man.
And it was just like so sweet to have this person who's like, you know, it's just not formal. I just got a call, and he had probably just bumped into him and was like, hey, you should call Mike Mitchell. And that was just such an interesting way. And I love that how different people have different ways in which they move. Some people are real formal. They would have called and said, hey, would you be interested in this opportunity? Would you be, hey, have fun with Sturgill tonight? And so Amy's going to see Sturgill Simpson at the,
cool.
yeah. So, some people would say, hey, do you want the opportunity? They don't want to waste it. And Michael's more of the like, he's just going to put it out there for you and do that
Yes.
thing. Kind of thinking about, so that part, that's really interesting. I'm experiencing my own, like, I went to TSU in the late 90s for a little bit as a student, and then I was there again to do some graduate work to get my teaching certification. Not an alum, but I've been on that campus a bunch.
Yeah.
And so, like, being there teaching, it's so surreal to me to be on this space, this campus, this place where, like, my mom got her degree from there, my mother-in-law got her degree from there. It surprises kids because I'll be like, I went to TSU graduation in like 95, and they're like, for what? And I'm like, for my mom. And they're like, and so that, but like getting to be at this place that I really love is like kind of overwhelming, and it's kind of surreal that you just walk by and like, did I just have a conversation with Sam Dunson or Kalina Sales, or Kalina won't be in her office? It's like, oh, because she's presenting somewhere nationally, or doing all these different kinds of things,
or writing a whole book.
Writing or editing a whole second book, and and then Michael's got stuff going on, Sam's got stuff going on, Cynthia's got stuff going on, Jane Allen has stuff, Carlisle and Eric have things going on. What is, you didn't have to talk about like anything in particular, but just like, what do you want? Like you said, there's this lull, you're not at the activity spot. Like, what do you want to be working on? What's the next big thing that you are working on, or that you're like, feel like you're gearing up to be like, oh, I'm going to do this series or this series? I know that you often will work in series, and that's helpful for you. Yeah. Is there a series that you're like, when I get some of this time back for myself and figure these things out, I'm going to work on this series? Like, what's...
Yeah, it's like this idea that's been lingering, the familiarity of Black culture. Okay. And I know that's, there are familiarities within cultures just in general, but the part that I like to focus on with Black culture in particular are kind of like just these funny things. So if you go on Reels, and you'll see that random things that Black people do for no reason, and then it'll be something like placing a fork, like at a restaurant. If I get a spoon and I've stirred my tea with sugar or whatever, instead of just placing the spoon on the naked table, as my grandmother used to say, don't place it on the naked table, then I'll get like the paper from the sugar and then put the spoon on the sugar, as like on the sugar paper, like it's like a safe, like germ-free type situation. In between. Yeah, in between.
So the naked table was meant germs.
The naked table, it has all the germs, but the sugar packet
that you touch with your hands, that's germ-free.
And several other people probably touch, but it's just something about it. And so my cousin and I, sorry, I touched the mic. Is that okay? Oh, okay. My cousin and I, because she sent me and my sister the reel. And so then the next few times that we went out to eat, now she lives in Memphis, but the next few times we both separately went out to eat. This is Gina, Jessica. We took pictures of these just random things that you just do innately. And then I sent her a picture of it, and we just die laughing at it. It's like, why are we this way? So like things like that, those are the things that are popping in my head, because I was getting to this, there's a humor in the familiarity of Black culture that I just really enjoy. Right. Because I'm a humorous person, you know, and so so that's what's in my head.
For you, did those small things that like don't put the spoon on the naked table, did those come in this idea, to this project, did those become big paintings? I love that. So like monumentalizing these like small things,
yeah. Because it makes me think of Klaus Oldenburg. Like the thought just popped in my head, because he has a spoon,
that big giant spoon,
with a giant spoon with the cherry. But yes, it goes wide range. It's like hairstyles, the things that are I'm thinking of for this series, hairstyles and sayings, and it's just, and I've really realized that I do like working large.
Yeah.
I love working large. So, yeah.
I've got a question. You don't have to answer it. Will all that work be for everyone, or will some of that work be for an audience? Like, are there some of those things that you want to talk about that aren't for me to look at? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it does.
Like, is there anything that you want to make a painting of where your friend might be like, hey, that's not something we're sharing, that's ours? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That still might be funny and it still might be really familiar, but there's like kind of breaking of a, like, we don't have to tell them everything.
Gotcha. Not that's not how I have it in my head.
Gotcha.
Because that's a really good question. So I don't.
Can I tell you why I have that question?
Yeah.
So I'm teaching at TSU, right? The camera can see who I am, right?
Yeah.
I'm serving, in this particular class, I'm serving only like black students. And so there's a kid who had reached out to me, an adult, she's a grown woman, she'd reached out to someone's like, you can't say kids. I'm like, to me, I'm almost 50. Anybody under 30 feels
That's
like a kid to me.
feel.
But
I
so
think
this
they're
woman
babies.
in my class reached
Yeah.
out and said, hey, can I get a letter of rec for this organization, right? So she's joining, right,
Yeah.
sorority.
Yeah.
And I say, sure.
Yeah.
I have to be honest, I can only say how long I've known you. And she's like, it's a formality. Like, I just have to have a professor. And I'm like, done.
Gotcha.
So I'm in the class and I see her and everyone's around and it's not a formal part of class. We're kind of just getting to know. And I just start saying, hey, I got your letter and I'm really excited for you. And I'm like, I'm talking about it. And she's looking at me and it takes me a little too long, but she's looking at me and I can see her face. She's looking at me like, this is not something we can discuss.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
talking about this.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I'm the only oddball in there. Like, everybody, and she's like, no. Like, this is what I can talk about inside of this. This is like, I'd realized I'd broken this thing. And I think, well, if that's true of someone, she asked me to write a letter of rec. She invited me into the conversation.
Yeah.
And now I know in that conversation that when I get invited again, that's only between me and that student. Because I've written letters of rec all the time for people, and they'll ask me about them. And I'm learning that if it's for an organization on campus,
if it's for fraternity,
that it's not to be discussed.
Yeah.
And then I see freshman kids make the mistake. So it isn't just me. Like, people are learning constantly on campus. Like, that's not something to talk about.
Right.
So that's why the question kind of came up.
Oh, okay. So that's a little different.
And I know that I know that's different. I'm just saying that's why the question popped into my head was that idea of, like, do you have a sense that somebody might see your work and go like, why are you sharing that? That's are you making fun? Like, are you I just was curious.
Do you understand what happened in that situation that you were in though?
I think that that is secret, and that conversation, that I'm not supposed to let anyone in that room know that she would be applying for that sorority.
Gotcha.
And that was breaking a secret that wasn't mine to break. Is there other stuff that was happening?
That's pretty much the gist of it. And then because you could have, the fact that you didn't say it was for this sorority is probably because everybody knows when there are going to be like interest meetings and lines and things like that. So even if you say recommendation letter, that person is probably scared, like, wait a minute, no, don't say anything about the recommendation letter just because.
I also realized if there was someone in the room that was in a different hierarchy than her,
Yeah.
that it reflects bad
If
on
they
her.
were in the sorority,
because she didn't
yeah.
tell, she wasn't smart enough to tell, in their mind,
Yeah.
might have not, wasn't smart enough to tell me, like, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And then you could see on her face that the lesson she learned was like, in the future, I should let anyone know,
This is a secret.
like, hey, this is a thing, so we were both kind of learning.
Gotcha.
And she wasn't mad, and I walked up to her and I just kind of tapped her desk and I said, I'm really sorry. I was like, I'm realizing in real time that I've put you in a bad spot.
Yeah.
I was like, is there anything I need to do? And she was like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then when everyone left afterwards, I double checked again. I said, hey, is there, she's like, it's really okay.
Yeah.
I said, I will never do it again. Like, thank you for the graciousness in which you are handling this faux pas on my part.
Yeah, no,
but I think for her, I think she probably, an older student would have told her, hey, that's on you too. Like, when you ask, you should say, hey, don't talk about this. If you don't know who you're asking, like, double check to make sure they know. So anyway, that was interesting. So so back to this work about like, you want to make this stuff monumental. There doesn't seem to be. What do you like about the question that I asked when you said it was a good question, or why do you think it's a good question for you?
Because I never want to be the type of person that is like, oh, you have to be there. Oh, you're not a part of this culture, so you wouldn't understand. That's not me. I want everybody to be able to look at it and be like, that's really like, if you can relate to it, that's interesting, and or just the spirit of it. But at the same time, there are times, just based off of the history of Black people and what our culture has had to go through, that it's not like, that's why I say it's a good question, because there are times when I feel a certain way about what has happened, and then how even it is oftentimes blown off by other groups of people. And so, but that's kind of like apples and oranges, though. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? That's why I say it's a good question.
Yeah.
So just because that has happened and I feel a certain way about it doesn't mean that I'm going to make something that I am Xing out a group of people to enjoy or to laugh or to have a smile at.
You don't feel like the work's going to be hijacked to be like, she's poking fun at this, or or I can laugh at this.
Right.
It gives me. You feel like the work's. I was talking with Marlos about that, and he was talking to Derek Forjor about a particular painting.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this, like, go back and listen to Marlos's most recent conversation that we had. And he had that, and he said, look, that painting is really great, but like, and kind of in some ways was like, where's that painting going? Who bought it? What do you think like, what's going to happen with them? Are they going to be a good steward of that painting? Because that painting has a power in it.
Yeah.
It's telling a story about Black folks, and it's telling the story you want to be told, but in kind of a quote, in the wrong hands, it could tell a very different story. So, kind of thinking about, you like to work in series. How many of these little fun things, like, are you just now in the process of collecting, like, hey, don't put the spoon on the naked table, and then maybe are there other ones that you already have that you're open to sharing what they are?
Yeah.
Like, what's another one of those that you really like that you want to make a painting?
Hairstyles. And
what's the funny one about that for you? Is that, will they all be in relationship to humor?
Yes. Well, sort of, kind of. So that one is a humorous one, the one with the spoon and the paper. But I want to start pulling from like old school things that is kind of a double-edged sword, in that they're funny because of, they're humorous in a way. They're slightly humorous in a way because how can I say this? Well, I'll just say it. Like, for instance, let's say finger waves. Okay. There are certain hairstyles that even within the culture are looked at as like hood, or you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So what I like to do is pull that into an image and then celebrate it.
Gotcha.
But there is a slightly humorous part to it, because it's like, my thing is like, wear the style, but also now we're in a celebration mode of it, not a putting down mode of it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because oftentimes, that's a good example of that in my work is
when breaking up that, like, class or hierarchy of like, if you have that hairstyle, I might look down on someone could get looked down on that because that's not sophisticated, or that's not business class, or that's not professional, and you're saying, hey, let's celebrate that.
The second part of that, yes, and the first part of it, yes, too. But here's the thing: a person might not get an interview or a certain type of interview walking in with the hairstyle. There are laws in certain states where the hairstyle is legal to deny the job because of the hairstyle. Sure. But my thing is, like, because that is the standard to be able to like have a certain lifestyle, then now within the culture we buy into what is happening up here that's not right.
Right.
And so it's like with the names of my previous paintings, like Kanisha and Shamika and things like that, I'm celebrating the names. So now even in my classes, like, I've had some really interesting names, really beautiful names. So now I always, when I call roll, I'm like, is this the right way to pronounce your name?
Right.
You know, and then someone, well, I go by this. Okay, that's cool. And that's however you prefer to be called, I'll call you that, but is this the correct way to pronounce your name?
Right.
Just to make sure, just to honor that, no matter what the name, no matter what the hairstyle, So that's where the meaty part of it comes into play.
Because it's arbitrary, right? Like, we decided something means something culturally. And so like somebody not getting this thing because of the way in which that hairstyle still took. I can walk in with my hair like this and get lots of job interviews without even combing my hair. So the idea that a young black woman could spend 5 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours or all day, and then her hair is not professional enough. When I did this, and then, my hair fits this like mode of whiteness,
of okayness
or business classness. So it's all arbitrary. I just happen to fit, like, the ease in which I can just walk into a place. It's not because I have a gift of like, oh, I know how this thing works. It's like I just look the part in a lot of ways. And so, and
then to even take it a little further, like people, black women who, and this is not exclusive to black women, but black women have issues with hair. You know, that's within the culture, one of those things where it's like the hair is what is paid attention to, like, good hair versus bad. It's, that, but outside of the culture, like, what if I can't grow hair? Now I got to put all these chemical, like, wigs and, whatever the case may be. I'm not knocking anything, but I'm saying, like, I should be able to walk and compete just like the next person, no matter what.
Sure.
So
it sounds like you're going to do this great thing in this series, is like it's going to have a range. Like, there's going to be some funny stuff, and then there's going to be some heavy stuff. And which I love talking with students about, because I always say that art happens on this spectrum, and I've got to change my reference because these students are too young that I'm teaching now. But I used to say art happens between like Dumb and Dumber and Schindler's List. And it's like somewhere in between. Like, that's where art is, right? And
I ask my students in art appreciation on.
So I need a new Dumb and Dumber, and they haven't seen Schindler's List either. Like, I need a new heavy and a light, and then the conversation still works.
I asked them if they had seen School Days.
No.
None of them saw School Days, and I was like, you need to watch School Days because it's just like what you're doing right now, So and I'm like, have y'all heard of Spike Lee? So I ask them what I think are like, kind of like dumb questions, and sometimes, like, I even asked a student, a class of mine a couple of semesters ago, if they knew what colorism was, and they were like, no, ma'am. And so I'm not, y'all don't know what colorism?
Right.
No, I'm not, I was like, okay.
Right. Knowledge shaming people.
And then you just explain it, And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know everything about it either, but I know the gist of it is this.
Right.
So that I could carry on with whatever it is I'm talking about.
Right.
But that is, School Days. I was like, yeah. And then they asked me, had I seen something called Lorax? Lorax? Never heard of it before in my life. I was like, and I don't have kids either, so so it's like I wouldn't know, the new stuff. But they explained it to me and made me interested in watching it.
This is a good time because we looked over to. Does anybody have questions? Liz, I know you did a deep dive on Donna's work, and we've got Donna's close friend. Does anyone have any questions? Just stuff that we've talked about that you want to ask? A little slow drip. This brownie was brought to you by
Slow drip.
Yum. Liz, who made this brownie? Miss Boo.
Yep.
Oh, I love that name.
So that.
I did want to touch on something.
Yeah, please.
The hairstyle thing. So the humorous thing, I think, is when I think of hairstyles in the African American community, I think of Patti LaBelle.
Oh.
All those hairstyles.
Yes.
That she had and how they are humorous, but
They
were
are.
the style back in the.
They were a
back in the day,
style.
but it was like.
It was a
she
whole
had hair
vibe.
Like this, and then it'd be like this, and it was just all over the place. And so
Yeah.
I could picture them because she was such an international star. Like I can picture, and the one I'm picturing was like her hair was like
fans.
very sculptural, like
Yeah.
and it was like there's no way she could like it was just for the stage, but it was
Yeah.
like it was such, and it was in like a national
work of
magazine.
art.
It was a
It was a
full
work
color
of art.
magazine, and like that.
And that's how she walked around.
Sure.
And what was I gonna say? Oh, I was just talking about that to my sister the other day.
Patti.
Like the fans, yeah. And then I was in the car, I was like, she used to do,
Yeah, and I think I used to do like my bangs in a fan.
Yeah.
Back in the 6th grade.
Yes.
I mean, it was a thing.
Yeah,
But
it was
I
a
think
thing.
everybody not everybody, but
She was
black
fabulous.
people did the fan.
And it's
Mhm.
fabulous. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good reference. Patti LaBelle. Yep.
I just want to make sure the floor is open if anybody has questions. I always have a million to. So the conversation about hairstyle and like class and just that reminds me of the Microsoft Word thing that you did,
Yeah.
where you would get
yeah.
like
The
talk a little bit
names.
about what that was like, what that project was.
Oh, so that was an interesting idea and thought. I had noticed how like when you type in names, the whole spelling of the name, depending on what it was either spelled correctly or incorrectly, depending on which name you put in. So you could put in Kanisha, and then it had a little red line under it.
Right, it's spelled wrong.
It's spelled wrong. And then you could put in Elizabeth or Donna, and then there's no red line. And so I just had this idea to come up with these place cards that had like all the names were names of people that I knew, whether it was like your traditional name or a more creative name. And then I paired that with the last name of all of the presidents of the United States, all the way back to Washington, to touch on like the idea of during slavery times, like women having babies for the masters and things like that. So that was it was kind of a layered situation, a layered thought and idea there. But the main part was just noticing these things. And I had noticed that about Microsoft a long time ago prior to even thinking about that project. But yeah.
I think it's one of the great things about the work that you're making is that it's work that I want lots of people to be able to see. And especially white folks, because you do, like you talked about before, there is a generosity in which you're making. Like even if the work is about, right, specifically the African American community, the graciousness in which you're like allowing anyone to come to that work. You're saying, hey, here's this thing. It's really important to me, and it's important to these folks. But I want people to see it. And the Microsoft Word doc piece is the thing that I want to show all the people who think like, I don't get it. And I want to show them that when Kenesha puts her name in, that the coding of business class culture tells her that she's incorrect.
Absolutely.
Like, it's like the thing I want people to see is like, what would that feel like to you that when you type your name in, software has been coded to say that you are wrong? And then tell me, do you still not see what's happening here?
Right.
Like, do you still not see that these kids, these students, right? And we think about their names and we talk about like, oh, those names are made up. So is every other name that's ever existed.
Yeah.
They're like, the language is made up.
Right.
And so that part's really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Have I told you the story about when I was teaching at McGuinness? So this kid walks in and she's one of those students. It's 3 weeks into the semester and she's been skipping class for 3 weeks. And so the only reason I know that is, one, the way she walks in. Two, she's escorted into my class. And the only reason you're escorted into the class is when the high school semester starts. You have that happen. Kid gets brought in and they've been skipping class. They've been taking advantage of the like confusion of the beginning of the year and then no one having, and they've just been walking around, and if anyone says anything, oh, I'm waiting for this thing and my counselor hadn't gotten my schedule yet. And she's just been doing that for the last phase of when you could do it. So 3 weeks in, this kid shows up and she walks in and I immediately think, oh, I'm gonna love this kid because she's just got just attitude, and she thinks that she's gonna battle with me, and she doesn't know that I'm just like super excited that she's walking in. I'm just like, whoa, look at you. She's got Jordans on, and so we're chatting, and she sits down, and I'm like saying her name, and I say, hey, am I saying your name correctly? She's like, yeah, it's fine. And I go, no, like, I want to get it right.
Yeah.
And she turns around and she's like, why? And I'm like, because I think your name's awesome. And I'm Michael David Mitchell. And to be honest, I'm a little jealous of your name.
Yeah.
And she's sitting with her friends or whoever she's willing to tolerate, because she's like, she doesn't want to sit with any of us. She's for 3 weeks has been choosing the hallways over us, but she's sitting with her friends, and she turns to me and she goes, that is a boring ass name.
Dang, I love it.
All the people at the table like just get like really nervous because they're like, you can't say that to this white man, like he's the teacher, like he's gonna get mad at you. And I immediately go like, oh, this kid has comedic, like she has the ability to like hold a stage, like, and she knows that I've offered a yes and, like I've said this thing, and she has comedically responded back, and so the kids are like, they don't know, but I'm like loving it, right? So I go, and I laugh, and I go, that is really funny. and so the kids are like, they're horrified, and so then she, being what a good comedian does, she recognizes the horror, and she went, your mama had 9 months to think of that. She came up with that shit day of.
No, you have never told me this story. That is hilarious. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
And the kids got even more horrified.
Oh my gosh,
and
that's funny.
I said, I can't wait to tell my mom.
Oh my God.
And they then were like, what is happening here? Like, why is he, like, who is he? Like, that's disrespect. And none of it was disrespectful. She didn't really think that about. She was playing, and I was like, oh man, did I love this kid. Yeah. She didn't end up staying in class for too long. Like, there was just too much going on in her life. Like, she didn't have the capacity for reciprocity to be in my class at that moment. Yeah. There's too much going on. She just kept getting, like, and then at some point she got, but it's because, but that was a spot, and we were fine when she was in my class, because she was like, oh, he let me be funny. He rewarded me for this thing. And he didn't take himself too seriously enough to, like, I knew she didn't want to be in class. Yeah. I could tell by the way she walked in. Yeah. But that's one of my, and I told my mom.
Needs to be on a stage somewhere.
I told my mom, and she laughed, and she goes, well, we were just, I was like, Mom, I love my name. It's fine. Yeah. But you have to understand, like, for that kid, I've got 3 last names or 3 first names, depending on the way
Right.
you look at it. And she did think, and once she knew I wasn't like actually complaining about my name, she was like, "That is very funny that she would say that." Like, and she was like, "And so quick," you know. She was like so proud of her, you know. She was just like,
Oh my gosh.
But my mom is always like making muffins and stuff for kids, and so you know, and so I took her. I was like, "Hey, my mom." She's like, "You told your mom, and she still made me a muffin." I go, "She thought it was very funny."
Oh,
She said you were very quick with your comedic timing, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yes, that.
I hope that changed her. Like, not well. Let me not say that because who says somebody's life needs to be changed? But
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I hope that did something for her.
I think that what I try to do is with any students that I'm serving.
Yeah.
Is I try to shake up what they think the interaction is going to be. Sometimes that's about me being white, and this might be an opportunity for a kid who's never had a good interaction with a cis white male, right? They often look like the enemy, and the world has proven to them over. And so I've been teaching for 20 years, and sometimes I can kind of feel what that is, and sometimes that can just be. It can be about that. Sometimes it's about a dude being nice to him for the first time, right? So some of the young men that I'm working with, they just don't have dudes be sweet towards them.
Yeah.
And that sweetness isn't always me being sweet. Sometimes it's just knowing how to just like stay with them and connect with them for a longer, you know. And then sometimes kids, they need a tussle before they believe it's real. Right. Like
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to do that too.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm not happy that they need that part of it, but I'm like happy to stick in there and figure those out. But yes, I do hope that clicked with her of like, even if it just set up the thing of like, hey, you're funny and you can hold a crowd. Like she could do stand up immediately.
Yeah.
Just because you know how a lot of times comics will talk about how they had to like build up to know that to not stress about the crowd. She won't stress about any of us.
Yeah.
Like she's just like, I know
That's
I'm supposed to be here. I
amazing.
know I'm funny. I know I'm supposed to do my thing.
Yeah. That I'm like day of took me out.
That's
crazy.
It was already when she said that is a boring ass name. That's already top 5 funniest stories.
Absolutely.
Like because it's so fun. It's so funny that she took the bait, and she could have just ignored me and be like, dude, whatever, say my name. I'm not going to be here this long. You don't need to learn my name.
Let me say this though. That was funny what you said too. Like, I'm Michael.
Oh yeah.
The rhythm of that is now. Let's not miss that either. Now
I
that was funny
Donna.
too.
I do. I have a right to. But even when I taught at a Catholic school, like a lot of those kids' names is I've not grown up around a bunch of Catholic students, so even their Catholic names were like interesting to me because they were so specific and different to, you know. I think that's always been one of the things that's built relationships for me with kids is I learn their names quickly.
Yeah.
And I try to get their name right. And even if I don't get it right, I'll fight all semester and apologize each time.
Yeah.
And those kids most of the time are okay with that. Initially they're a little embarrassed that they're getting more attention because of my mistake.
Yeah.
But then they usually always are like, hey man, thanks for figuring that out. Because it usually doesn't take me a long time. But I have taught so many Briannas and Briannas.
Yeah.
And then if you mix in that there's a bunch of different ways to spell those, which I also love when people do like their own spelling. I'm like, this is the best. Like you spell Brianna and there's no vowels. Like, yes, that's amazing. Like, how'd you do that? Right? Like it doesn't bother me because to me that is the genius of language. And I also love when I think about a lot of those people's moms being at the hospital and then like looking at the doctors and then being like, this is what's going on the birth certificate, the like feminist power that is.
Yeah,
of saying, I don't care in the way in which you all are judging me here.
Right.
I'm putting this name
This
on
is the
this birth
name.
certificate.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
official.
Doesn't have anything to do. It's not about you. It's
Yep.
not about
Yep.
you helped me. You did your job.
Yep.
I'm naming my
And
kid.
so there's a part of me where I want to honor that moment for
Yeah.
that mother that was there saying I want to get it right for her.
Yeah.
And then if you have a nickname, I'll call you that.
Yeah.
But I do want to know how your mom wanted me to pronounce your name when she
Right.
said it the first time.
Yeah.
And it had that weight that was connected to a grandmother or it was connected to this or whatever the thing was connected to.
And then if you even think about nicknames, at least in my opinion, particularly with African American history being renamed, you know, as an African descendant, like being renamed in slavery, like a nickname is also a way to kind of take your power back too. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
yeah, I think it's so, I'm so fascinated with the conversation about students who are asking to have a different gender name, and how in rural communities, in more conservative communities in Nashville, across all different kinds of schools, people are getting real up in arms about that. And I'm like, but I can call Bobo, who's the star of the basketball team, and you have no problem with him,
right?
because he's picked that.
Listen.
Which, by the way, I love. Or Bug, who I taught down in a rural community, like
Booger.
this Booger. But I taught this young woman, her name's Bug.
Really?
That's what she went by. We're okay with that, but somehow, like, I can't have a kid who wants to go by this other name, and you're all of a sudden like, no, it has to be what's on the birth certificate. And it's like, but what about JoJo Dabbs, who I played against at White House, which is one of my favorite basketball names of all time.
Yeah.
Right? He's just this country white dude and could just bucket. Like, he was seriously one of the greatest basketball players in the last 40 years in this community. I would hate it if he couldn't go by JoJo.
Yeah.
Like, it was such a good basketball name, right? Like, and so,
I know exactly
and when
what
I'm
you're saying.
in, you know, when I taught at Maplewood, there was this kid named Sauce. I don't want Sauce to not be Sauce. Because
Sauce had to be Sauce.
Do you remember Sauce? Because I made.
I love that name.
Hey, he was in my art class. I take care of my art kids, and I made 50 Tabasco sauce cardboard things and painted them to look just like Tabasco. I loved this kid. He came to my class. He was quiet.
Yeah.
He didn't do any of his work. But if I went over to him and said, "Hey man, you got to do your work," he would do his work.
Yeah.
And he got into the Frist.
Oh. Wow.
And I think he's the only kid, I bet, who won a state championship, and at the same time his artwork was at the Frist.
Oh, that's crazy.
But I made 50 Tabasco sauces, so every time he hit a three-pointer, they had his number on them, and it said sauce and then his name, so it looked like Heinz 57, but it was 22 for sauce, and every time he hit a three-pointer, the crowd could put some sauce on it.
Oh, I love that.
And he loved it.
That's amazing.
And it was so fun. But again, it's like this funny thing about, like, nicknames. It's like we want to have them, but like, unless you want them.
Right.
And we don't agree with why you want them.
Yeah.
But to me, it's extension of that. Like,
it's like the person's personality. Like, it's something that they can lean into. You know what I mean?
Do you have a nickname?
I have
and you
some
maybe don't
that my
want to
mom.
share.
Yeah. Like most of my family call me Donnie.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's what my dad's family calls him. So that was kind of, you know, interesting. And then some other like D, you know, but not anything like Sauce.
A really good nickname like that you can.
That's like the best freaking nickname ever.
And he was so good. And he also like had a swagger and moved through so him and this other student, when I was a kid, my mom saved the Dream Team Kellogg's cornflakes had a paper zip up jackets that came in the Kellogg's cornflakes that were Dream Team.
Oh, really? Okay.
And they were paper, and they literally were made out of paper, and they were jackets. And I'd save those forever.
Yeah.
Joey's here now. He's probably mad that I gave these away, but they had all the players on them, the whole Dream Team, Jordan, David Robinson. They had all of them.
Yeah.
And they literally came in a cereal box. And Robert and Sauce, who were in my class, I was like, I want to see if these. And I said, hey guys, I've got these things. And I said, it's real weird, but back in the day, they used to put weird stuff in cereal boxes, and they loved them. Because they were like, these are so awesome. Because they were like, no one had them. No one had paper, and they literally put them on. They zipped up and they fit them.
Oh,
and I have photographs of them wearing those
really?
Kellogg's cornflake paper Dream Team. And I looked online; they were kind of expensive to like, because they were like a
The
collector's
collector's item, yeah.
But they weren't so expensive.
The
that
moment,
they
moment was.
they weren't
yeah.
they weren't worth more than the
Than
the
them,
experience
yeah.
of them. Even I even think about like if they threw them away when they walked out of class, and when they're 50, they're gonna be like, did that dude give us cornflakes jackets made out of paper? Like just that that different connection of what we can do often for kids is like tell them like you should watch School Days, you know, and they're like, oh, maybe I'll watch it, maybe they won't, but the one that does is gonna thank you because that's gonna connect them to a generation, or they're gonna get a joke at Thanksgiving that they haven't gotten ever.
Right.
And they're gonna be like, oh, that's what that's from, you know, that kind of thing. Like watching Martin, what that opens up for anyone that's watched it.
Yeah.
Right. Watching, you know, if you watched, you know, any of the shows that came on when we were kids, right? It just changes the conversation.
Yeah, it'll change the conversation.
I'll show, Joey and I watched Field of Dreams.
Okay.
And he was like, I've heard if
That's
they build
Kevin
it,
Costner,
if they build it, if you build it, he will come. He's like, I've heard that. I didn't know that it was from this weird movie. You know, this super weird, surrealistic kind of movie.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited about that new series.
Thank you.
Have you already started working on it, or are you just still collecting?
I'm still collecting data. There are other irons in the fire that aren't necessarily artwork, but some things. So I'm trying to juggle in my mind. But I got the stretcher bars.
Have you done any performance work?
Only William Popel. He did a video piece. I think that's the correct medium to say about Robert E. Lee. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but that's about
Jody had talked about that. Jody Hayes.
She was the one who. She was working at TSU as a gallery director
and
at the time,
got him to come,
and a professor, and she got him to come. And he did the whole production like in Nashville.
So you got to be part of that?
Yeah, I was a part. I was production assistant because I was in school at the time. I was production assistant and then also a character, one of the lead characters.
I didn't know that. That's gigantic.
So if you, thank you. It was amazing.
I mean,
was amazing just to see,
just to getting to be around him.
Yeah, to see him work was amazing. And I was really sad when he passed away because I'm just like, he looked young to me. Like he was young. Yeah. But if you look online, I'll send you the name of it once I pull it up. I'm gonna send you a screenshot. But I'm one of the leads on that.
No way.
On the screenshot, yeah.
You know, I got his he had an exhibit. If I remember the story correctly, in the National Endowment for the Arts pulled their funding, and so then the Andy Warhol Foundation kind of swooped in, and were able to fund it. It was one of the big moments where it was like this example of what is this really about? Because we've certainly had more controversial work than what he was making. Yeah, maybe this is about the fact that he's a black artist making controversial work, specifically about white supremacy.
Yeah.
And, you know, but it is interesting.
Was that when, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but was that when, did the National Endowment of Arts pull the funding? Was that when, the name is Mapplethorpe?
I think this would have been after that.
Okay, so they pulled funding a couple of times.
I'm not sure. Okay. But I do know that resulted in an exhibit that resulted in a book, and I bought that book. And in the book, you can do the flip, flip pages of stop animation. Yeah. And when you flip it, he's crawling on that skateboard in his famous crawl piece where he dresses up like Superman and crawled through the streets of New York. Yeah. And so when you flip the book, he actually moves.
Get out of here.
It's a cool
that's really
design.
Cool.
But you know
I've seen that Superman.
That reminds me in some ways the spirit of what you're talking about. What he was doing was some of that work was heavy and funny. Yeah. It seemed to be always funny. At the very least, it was always at this kind of spot of we're going to talk about how ludicrous this is. Yeah, I'm talking about the absurdity. I'm going and then the funniness and all those drawings, black people are, and then it would say this, white
Yeah.
people are this, you know,
Yeah.
and so just that there's all these, 50 drawings that's like white people are, and then black people are.
Yeah.
And those were and then he was making those weird stuff out of like milk and, all that stuff's going to stink. And like,
Yeah.
it's just like so interesting.
It is interesting.
But there seems to be a spirit there of what you're talking about in this new project that you're working on of like, I want to talk about blackness, but across this range, but always keep humor in it.
Got to keep humor in
Even if
it.
we're talking about like serious stuff.
Because to me, humor is like the door that opens to the other layers. So like you could either, like humor to me is like kind of like the beginning and the end. So it's like you open the door with humor, or humor invites you in, but then it also it's kind of like that. Okay, glad you came by, and so you laugh in the beginning. You have a conversation in the middle, and then you walk away feeling hope. Yeah.
Like the heaviness is for the middle.
Yeah, the heaviness is for the middle.
Let's make sure we get back to where we can all smile
and
on the way
hopefully
home.
the healing is in the middle as well.
Sure.
And then the hope.
Sure.
Yeah. So the hope leaves.
That's a really.
walks
I
out.
can't wait to like that. That's something I want to revisit through the years when we talk. Is this
Okay.
idea of like humor is like the alpha and the omega. Like humor is the beginning and the end of like a thing, and then the healing happens in the middle. That's really great. Well, I can't wait. I think those are going to be really fun. The reason I brought up performance, like you sang, you kind of got onto me for making you sing. But like, I hope you can acknowledge how beautiful your voice is, and that that's not a subjective thing. It's objective. Everybody in the room kind of stopped and were like, "Oh wow!" Like right, and that was just that was just you in first gear, right? That's not like belting it out kind of thing. But I've just, it made me start thinking of like, you're naturally funny, but you also have the ability to kind of like lock in and talk about heavy stuff, and just was curious. And then also the way in which you're like, you clearly, if you wanted to, could make just conceptual work, right? Where there's no paintings, like the Microsoft Word thing. That could have led you towards a like, oh, I'm going to get into everything in relationship to software, and I'm going to work in like much more of a social practice kind of way. And I'm going to like figure these things out. And so I was just wondering if that had ever, is there ever an allure to you of like, man, these paintings are hard to make. Like I'd love to orchestrate like in a kind of an activation in, public space, or does that ever excite you, that idea, especially knowing that you worked with William Popel, like one of the greatest ever that does that kind of work.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny that you say that, and I hate that it came off that I got on to you, but I
I don't mean it that way.
Okay.
I was just teasing.
So I actually appreciate my friends. And Jessica knows about this, like when they pull me into something,
well,
or they say,
the reason I'd said is last time I mentioned something and you said, I sing, and I was like, in my head, I was like, I remember this. This is my permission slip. To see if I can get it. And I wasn't like, I'm going to get Donna to sing tonight. I just was like, when it came up, I was like, oh, let's do this.
Let's do it. No, I appreciated that. But
and you come from a family of musicians.
Yeah.
And you're related to like one of the great, like, blues R&B musicians, right?
Yes, Bobby Blue Bland.
I think that's unreal.
I know, it's crazy. My mom has pictures. My mom is a singer, and my mom could blow. And she
has that family history been done from your side of the family, like, or is it all in lore? And I know that that's a different version of history, right? That's a private history that's happening in your family.
Yeah.
Has anyone in your family like archived those connections? Because I'm sure that's not the only one.
Right. Yeah.
That's just a famous one.
Yeah.
Right?
We've traced. We have a good
awesome.
Tree
Gotcha.
of knowledge there. Yeah. But yeah. So I'm trying to think of what I was going to say.
No, you were like, I'm glad I brought it up because you were.
Oh yeah, I am glad you brought it up. But to your point, as far as performance, the crazy part is I have been thinking about recording just everything I do, just to see just to have a record of, and then kind of coming out and exploring any and all talents and gifts. So
when you come on my TV show, it's going to be a natural fit.
I
Maybe
mean,
you'll be the
I'm down
maybe
for
you'll
whatever.
be the musician side and the artist side.
I would love to see what happens, you know.
Well, I'm gonna
That'd
posit
be
this,
cool.
and maybe you have no interest, but like maybe we should collaborate musically because I play music
Yes.
and I'm very much a hobbyist. You are a much better singer than I could ever imagine being, but that's exciting to
That's
me to like
funny.
work above my head.
Okay.
Right, so
let's
I've made music before. My
Yeah.
friend that used to live down the street from me, this guy John Davis, he like was in a famous band and like played the Conan O'Brien show, and he like recorded with me,
yes.
and he was just
What?
excited that I was making music, and so he like produced these songs. Like I think there's 3 songs that he produced for me, and it gave me like this like confidence of like, well, if John, who toured Japan with Green Day, is like interested in my music, maybe it's okay, you know. And, like,
Yeah.
and it just gave me
Yeah.
permission to be a hobbyist in this like world, and it's the thing that I do that I think is the closest thing that we ask students to do, which is to be brave
Yes.
and be
That's
outside of
good.
it and to kind of try. And so I'm like, well, I can be brave this way. And
Yes.
it's one thing for me to be brave in my studio down at the Arcade Arts, right? Which you were on that committee, and so thank you for that work that you did, that volunteer work that you did for
pleasure.
Arcade Arts, and
Yeah.
but that it's something. It's like nerve wracking that like. In some ways, when I'm having to work and like X Payne's there and Rod Magaha's there and you know, all those artists who are there,
Yeah.
but I know how to do that. Like I went to grad school, like I've been making art for a
Absolutely.
bunch of years. I have a confidence there, even if I'm nervous about what you might come into my studio and see.
Yeah.
I still have a bunch of tools of where like I know what I'm up to,
Absolutely.
even if I'm a little nervous.
Yes.
That's very different than playing music in Nashville around
feel
a
you
bunch
on
of
that.
world-class musicians.
Yeah.
Like in this room there might be people who've shared stages with, you know, like any room you're in. And so to have one of those musicians who had played on and gone on tour as a hired guitar player and had played in a bunch of studio sessions and then had his own band that had a success and had like an MTV hit when MTV like mattered in the
Like
90s.
first, yeah.
Yep, he had a top 10 like MTV hit.
Yeah.
For have somebody like that work with me and take me seriously, it also taught me a
That's a
lesson.
big deal.
It also taught me a lesson of graciousness.
Yeah.
Of like he didn't big time me. He was like, "Hey, what's the feel? Tell me how I can serve this project." It taught me a lesson of how, in a community as an artist, if you like somebody's idea, you can be in service just to that idea.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually make you lesser. It actually just makes me think. It made me love John even more.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, wow, he literally had the same producer as like the Foo Fighters. And he's working on my project. And he's taking it just as seriously. And he's staying up
As
till
working
2 in
with
the
the Foo
morning
Fighters,
to
yeah.
get it done.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a
His
true
producer,
musician.
his producer remixed Dre's 20th anniversary record.
Oh.
This dude had worked with everyone and had worked with John. So it's like, and he's taking my 3 little kooky country songs seriously. Like it is a really good lesson of like, hey, and when you're in an artistic community, that hierarchy's on the outside.
Yeah.
That's who you worked with and whatever that's over there.
That's over there.
This is what we're doing. And you know, Rob Matthews is a good point. Like Rob's showing it David Lusk, and he's selling when he sells his work there, it has a certain value to what that is. He's shown in Philadelphia, and he's shown in New York, and he's like just kind of universally certainly in our Nashville community, but I think regionally and nationally is respected as an artist.
Yeah.
And when he and I traded, he didn't ask me how much the piece was worth. He said, "I like that one.
Yeah.
Will you be open to trading it for this one?" And I was like, "Yeah." And that was such an awesome, again, the kindness. He didn't try to make it be about what it's. Well, technically, mine's worth this, and I show it David Lusk, and like, what would show? He didn't do any of that. He was like, I like that.
Did that happen when y'all talked at Sam's?
No, this had
opening?
happened. This had happened a while
Some time
before.
ago. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
I had invited him to Spark.
Uh-huh.
When I used to do that at the Frisk.
Yeah.
And had people come in and talk.
Yeah.
Which I think you did one of those.
I did. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that was the first kind of speaker series that I worked with Joe,
cool.
Christy, and my friend Dee Dee Melton at the Frist, and we used to bring artists into the Frist to talk to art teachers.
Yes.
Rob had done that talk, and it's one of the best talks I'd ever seen. It was so funny, and I then invited him to Father Ryan to give that talk again.
Gotcha.
So we just had connected over that. He's just such an
cool.
interesting guy. But also just like that, leaving his ego and whatever his like accolades were at the door.
Right.
And he was like, hey, there was these paintings that he was in an exhibit that I had at my house.
Yeah.
When I did the Fight or Flight show with my friend Brad Bornak, of Semi-Pro Arts, like, I was like, man, I love these paintings, but they're like, you know, they're like $1,500,
Yeah.
and they're worth 10 times that in my head, right? And he's like, I was like, man, he's like, hey, would you be open to a trade? And I was like, for one of these? He's like, yeah. And I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And he was just like, it was so natural. He's like, I like that one. Cool. Like this one.
Nice.
And now I've got this, you know, Rob Matthews at my house that
I
I'd
love
never
it.
be able to kind of like, just like afford in relation to my paycheck.
Yeah.
I would
know
never
what
be
you
able to
mean.
figure out how to budget that necessarily.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
I have this piece.
But
and
you
it's
have a piece.
because there's just this like artist to artist conversation.
Yeah.
Right? He's just open to that. Well,
I love it.
this has been fantastic.
It has.
Thank
I've
you so
enjoyed it.
much
Thank you for letting me be the first person.
And the most tenured person in Drawing South. You've been on the podcast 3 times
I'm
now.
the oldest. I love it.
Well, this is awesome. I love you so much, and I'm so
love you
grateful
too.
that you're in my artistic community. I appreciate
Likewise.
you. Yeah.
Ditto. Thank you.
And thank you, Liz. Slow Drip Coffee.
Thank you, Liz.
If you haven't been here before,
was the
please
best
come
hot
check it
chocolate.
out. Oh man, this brownie was great. Thanks.
Yeah. Finish one.
All right. Done. All right.